This week on Quality Digest Live, we talked to Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas, about manufacturing tech trends, tariffs, the skills gap, and what all that means for 2020. See you in 15 seconds. Welcome back to Quality Digest Live. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest. And joining us today will be Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas. Thomas, as most of you probably know, is a data and technology company that's been a leading resource for the industrial workspace for industrial marketplace for about 120 years or so. And because so many manufacturers and buyers use Thomas data and Thomas products, Thomas is kind of uniquely situated to look at what is influencing businesses across the United States. So Tony, thanks for joining us once again on the show.
Hey Dirk, it's great to see you. Happy New Year, by the way.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too. Thomas recently released its, I think you call it the Thomas Index report for the fourth quarter of 2019. And this looks at sourcing trends for products and services across pretty much all industries. So, and it's based on what your users are looking for, I believe. And so what kind of products and services they use. And that's kind of what the report reflects. Is that correct?
Exactly right, Dirk. So in any given month, 1.5 million to 2 million engineers, procurement professionals, or MROs are sourcing products and services on thomasnet.com. And that gives us this real-time behavioral data with which we make some predictions about what's moving and what's hot in terms of sourcing.
Okay, and so what were the products and services that kind of rose to the top this year?
Well, probably not a huge surprise. 2 or 3 of them that were products or services that have really been in the news for quite a while. So steel, printed circuit boards, packaging, and lumber. Now, I'm going to stop right there because I have the feeling you're going to say, wait, packaging?
Well, yeah, well, exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I mean, steel and printed circuit boards, those make sense. I mean, printed circuit boards, the electronics industry is huge, so obviously I would expect printed circuit boards to be up there, steel, of course, to be up there. But packaging was a little surprising to me because there is a big trend across the United States to reduce the amount of packaging. There's a lot of concern about, packaging waste and that's in packaging getting to landfills and so forth. So my gut reaction would have been that packaging would have seen a hit and not, I think your report showed like a 300% increase in packaging, and that kind of caught me a little off guard. So what's that all about?
Well, bear in mind a couple of things. So you're talking about the top 4, right? Steel, printed circuit boards, packaging, and then lumber. So you're spot on, Dirk. Those other 3 are traditionally going to be highly sourced materials, products, and services. You're also seeing a little bit of an influence of second and tertiary sourcing in and around some of the either current or threatened tariffs. So putting that aside for a minute, bear in mind that when we talk about the increase in packaging, what we're talking about is the increase in sourcing for packaging systems, right? That doesn't mean you're seeing a 300% increase in the number of packages that are sent. However, the number of packages that are sent are up for 3 basic reasons, right? So the first being, e-commerce is having an extraordinary impact, as you well know. So as you see what's happening with Amazon, but other e-commerce providers, you look at what happened in the fourth quarter, we had another record set. Here in the city of New York City, there's over 35 million packages delivered just in the borough of Manhattan on a weekly basis. So it's really remarkable to see what's happening. So 2 things are happening. Lots of packaging systems are being sourced. You are seeing an increase in packaging, e-commerce being the first reason. Second reason is the inverse of what you were touching about. So you were talking about the need for environmental concerns. It's both a consumer sentiment, but also an appropriate thing for companies to be involved in. So part of that is you're seeing a big movement towards higher recyclable materials. So it doesn't mean people are sending less packages, but it does mean what those packages, the materials they're made from, are changing. You are seeing smaller formed sizes for packaging too. So you look at Amazon and some of the other companies, they're experimenting with far smaller size of packaging, which reduces the overall packaging materials. Third thing, and it's related to the sourcing of packaging systems, there's been a tremendous amount of advanced automation around these packaging systems. So it's a step change in the technology. So those three things, growth in e-commerce, the need for more sustainable packaging materials, and advances in packaging systems are really what are driving the growth there.
And I think somewhat related to that is your report also mentioned growth in aluminum containers, rather than using, I guess what that was in order to replace paper cups and plastic cups and so forth is aluminum containers, right? Is that?
Yeah, significant lift in aluminum containers, and you nailed it, Dirk. It really is this movement. Everybody these days is very conscious of hydration and drinking more water and taking great care of themselves in that regard. So you're seeing a shift from plastic bottles to aluminum bottles, and that's really driving it. But it's not just for water. So it's for energy drinks and sodas and the like. You're seeing, in many cases, it's a return to aluminum for some of those types of things. But in other cases, for constant use or regular reuse of water bottles, you're seeing aluminum use for a tremendous number of those. So big lift in the use of aluminum for that.
Okay. We kind of got sidetracked on those because that was interesting, particularly the packaging thing. So, but in general, what have the trends that you saw in the fourth quarter and maybe 2019 in general, are those giving you an inkling, Thomas, an inkling of what we can expect to see in 2020? What kind of things we'll see moving forward into 2020?
Yeah, a few things that we would suggest that you're going to see in 2020, some that would be similar to what we talked about, but frankly, our forecast would probably be in other areas where you're going to see some really interesting growth. So the first thing I'll mention, and I won't put these in rank order, Dirk, but the first thing I'd mention is solar has really hit the tipping point, and we're seeing a huge lift in sourcing for solar collector panels. So this is based on a big focus on renewable energy usage, and we're seeing an increase of 67% between 2000 and 2016. And we think this boom, coupled with a 25% tariff on solar panel imports, mean buyers are going to increasingly look for domestic suppliers for solar panels. So I think you'll see a big lift there. We're tracking very carefully the increased sourcing activity around lithium-ion batteries. And the ongoing availability of materials like lithium, nickel, and copper that are required to produce these lithium-ion batteries, driven by the increased popularity of things like electric car batteries and home assistants, which all include copper as a key component. Less copper is available for inclusion in lithium-ion batteries, further limiting the battery's manufacture and availability. So again, higher demand, lower availability of the core materials that go into it. So you're going to see more and more demand for lithium-ion batteries. There may be a little bit of a tough, limited supply of those going forward, but you're going to see an increase in that area as well. We just touched on another area, Dirk, that we think will see a big lift, which was the aluminum bottle marketplace. And we've started to see that, but we think that's really, really going to expand in 2020 for the reasons that we touched on earlier. And then the last one I'd mention are construction contractors in the related marketplace. So we saw a fairly significant slowdown in construction, particularly in this country, post the recession that we had in 2008 through 2010. What rebounded the quickest was commercial construction. So you saw a remarkable lifting in commercial construction. What's now lifted are residential housing starts. Combine that with the White House initiative to provide over $200 billion in infrastructure spending, we think you're going to see a sustained lift in a lot of different categories related to construction. particularly around commercial, but also residential construction as well.
Okay. Well, so you mentioned a couple things there that this is no surprise to anybody, but obviously what happens within an administration, whatever laws get passed or regulations or tariffs happen, does have an effect on manufacturing. You touched on a couple things I think were interesting, and I want to dive into them a little bit. You seem to indicate there that the boost, the lift, as you said, in solar panels in the U.S. may in some part be driven by tariffs. I believe there's a 25% tariff on solar panels coming from China, which in a sense then is probably bolstering the solar panel industry in the U.S. Is that a fair assessment?
Without question, Dirk. And there's really two drivers there. One is solar's hitting its stride. And you're seeing the price performance ratio, if you will, of solar come into a more realistic range. You're seeing the same thing in electric vehicles, by the way, too, as the cost of batteries, the production, and it becomes more of a mainstream option for consumers. You're seeing the same thing happen in solar. Combine that with a healthy tariff on Chinese imports of solar panels, and you're seeing a very significant lift in sourcing for North American suppliers of solar panels and related technologies.
So is there any, and this is probably kind of an unfair question to throw at you, but I'll do it anyway. So is there any indication that solar panels made in the United States are going to be more expensive than those that would traditionally are coming from China? And is that something that the solar business is concerned about? That the market's going to be somewhat hurt by the fact that they're going to be most likely going to be more expensive?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dirk. And the honest answer is I don't know pound for pound, what that price ratio is against the imported solar panels versus, in this case, domestic solar panels. I will tell you as a bit of a generalized statement, most people are surprised at how competitive North American manufacturers are on a global stage today on a per unit basis. In the case of solar panels, I'm a bit out of my element there. I can't honestly tell you whether the price difference there is substantial or not, regardless of the tariffs.
Okay, now, and also, I believe you mentioned, or I read in the report that the lithium-ion batteries, some impact on those because of tariffs on, I believe, the raw materials coming in.
Correct. So as I was rambling on a little bit earlier about that phenomenon, particularly around copper. Copper is a component of lithium-ion batteries, as it is in so many other finished products, if you will. There's tariffs on copper, and there's also a limited supply of copper. And so those two things combined are making it a bit of a challenge there. You've also got a higher demand overall for lithium-ion batteries. So it's interesting where you're seeing a lot of alternative sourcing around looking for lithium-ion battery suppliers and providers, but you're also seeing companies looking for more copper, obviously, at the right types of prices.
Okay, so we've mentioned a couple things, tariffs, and you mentioned that the building industry, construction industry, has seen a lift because of initiatives passed by the current administration. So going forward, what other factors do you see impacting, from Thomas's perspective, from what you guys look at, impacting the economic growth in the coming year?
Boy, I think there's several things. I think there had been a bit of a pause that we could see based on uncertainty around the tariffs. While the news about the tariffs in any given day can move forward or backwards depending on what news reports you're reading, we actually don't see any negative impact right now on sourcing on the tariffs. Now, if a domestic manufacturer is selling into let's say selling into China, and because of the tariffs, they're unable to do that, they may see an increase in sourcing. It may not be enough to outrun the business they lose from China. So to be clear about how, the game of chess there starts to play out. But there's nothing that we're seeing in the data that would suggest that we're seeing any either weakness in the industrial economy. If anything, we're seeing a remarkable amount of strength. And I say that based on the 72,000 categories that we track, but a lot of the sourcing demand that we're seeing is around infrastructure, raw materials and things like steel and lumber and other things that we've touched on, but also around machinery for construction, things like CNC machining and some of the kind of capital equipment oriented components here. So we're seeing a lot of health and vibrancy. The last thing I would mention too, Dirk, that we track just as a byproduct of our business, and this is both good and bad news, I think, for the industrial economy, is the job growth in North American manufacturing has been significant. At the same time, it's shining a light on the fact that we've got a lot of open jobs. I think by the end of 2020, it's forecast that there could be as many as 1.7 million open positions that can't be filled in North American manufacturing. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. Healthy economy. North American manufacturers are very competitive on the global stage today. I think we've got a reasonably healthy global economy. But boy, the thing that could hold things back a little bit is really that skills shortage, if you will, or not enough skilled labor to fill the open positions.
Boy, you just set me up right for the next question. I appreciate that. So actually, it's the question's got two parts. Number one is, what kind of feedback or what are you hearing from manufacturers regarding the skills gap? And number two, why would Thomas be, what form does that information come in on the skills gap, given that people are basically going to Thomas just to look up, suppliers and vendors and so forth? So I'm kind of curious why that information even gets to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. So starting about a year and a half to 2 years ago, we got a reach out from the Department of Commerce around our Thomas Industrial data. And they were starting to look at our Thomas Industrial Index and some of the other things. And we were actually invited to come to the White House to lead a roundtable on trends in U.S. manufacturing by using our data. That relationship allowed us to also see some of the data that the government looks at in terms of labor and labor department statistics. And all that data is not proprietary. Others can look at it, but frankly, it raised it on our radar a little bit more. The other thing is, Dirk, we've got about 10 to 12,000 customers. We spend a tremendous amount of time with those customers. We survey them on a regular basis. So we'll do surveys where we capture as many as 800 of those companies and get all kinds of information from them. It's not quite at the level of the data we track, obviously, on sourcing, but it allows us to track what's going on around the skills shortage. And our interest in it is really twofold. One is we like many, we note it, we talk about it, but we also want to try to highlight solutions that we see happening in the marketplace. So through our Thomas Industry Update email newsletter, through our podcast, through our marketing insights that you can reach on thomasnet.com, we've actually been highlighting solutions ranging from simple apprenticeship programs through to government programs, through to community programs that either companies or school districts or different initiatives or programs are really tackling this skills shortage problem.
Oh, terrific. And that was, you actually answered my next question, was just, so the manufacturers are taking approaches to try to address the skills gap themselves using these various methods that you mentioned. They're not just sitting there on their hands.
Yeah, and Dirk, you're probably aware of some of these as well. It's really remarkable. Since we kind of opened the door for this and solicited feedback, we've just been pleasantly overwhelmed by the number of programs. Some are purely grassroots programs. Some are very sophisticated. We've developed a very close relationship with the Department of Commerce and the Small Business Administration, and to watch some of the programs they're trying to initiate and help with various communities. One of the most interesting ones we came across was the Wallingford Public School System in Wallingford, Connecticut. And a brilliant guy, Dr. Sal Menzo, came and took that school district over roughly a decade ago. And he brought together 10 companies, and he actually had the companies help him design the long-range strategic plan for the public school district. And what it created was this absolutely phenomenal program where young people going down to literally grade school levels are engaged in the community with local manufacturers. And what it's done is created now a nice steady pool of talent for young people that are doing apprenticeships or internships in through high school. And guess what? It's now a steady flow of jobs. That's a particular hotbed for aerospace companies, as you might know. So that's a small example, but that's being replicated around the country. It's really impressive to see.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's good. All right, Tony. Well, I think that'll do it for today. Appreciate you, once again you joining us on the show. Appreciate that.
Dirk, it's always great to be with you. Thanks very much.
All right, so that was Tony Uphoff, President and CEO of Thomas. And by the way, there is a lot of really useful information and analysis, and as he mentioned, blogs, video blogs, articles, and so forth, as well as just the data that you normally can get from Thomas. Just go to www.thomasnet.com and check all that out. There's really a lot of really interesting information out there, particularly if you're a manufacturer. So that is it for today's Quality Digest Live. As usual, if you have some ideas of who or what you would like to see on the show, send those to us at qdl@qualitydigest.com and we will try to bring them on. So thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next week. So long.